We miss you.
Miss you guys too. I'd love to be traveling.
I know. Are you back in you're back in California?
No. I'm still here on Oahu. My daughter and granddaughter live in California, but anyway.
So you're still around.
Right? It opens up Monday.
Right.
Okay,
Right,
so let's
Naomi.
get started. So it's just some housekeeping first. This is being recorded on Zoom. So the recording has started already. So I'm going to be muting people, especially if we have background noise. So it should be just the person speaking. So type your message in the chat box or wait until the Q&A section. So we will have Q&A question and answer periods after each section. So you can raise your hand or put in the chat your question, but we'll just go one by one on the questions. Okay, so on the bottom of your screen, you'll see where there's a participant icon. You click on that, and when that box comes up, there's a raise your hand feature that you can click on. And then we're going to have these PowerPoint screens. So if you want to see that in your main computer screen, click on speaker view so that you can see the PowerPoint and the words, because some of these slides have a lot of words on it. So you can see it a little bit better with the speaker view. So on the top right, there's a box, you click speaker view. And then to mute yourself, you can just click the icon on the bottom, the microphone icon, or use the space button to bar to unmute or mute. Okay, so our current board starts with Wynn Shoneman is the president, and here's Wynn to do some welcome messages. Wynn?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate, on behalf of the board, I appreciate everybody taking some time out from busy days. I think most everybody would prefer to be on the beach, but what we have going on between now and the end of the Rotary year, I think is very important for many of our clubs in the district, as well as the District 5000 Foundation. District 5000 Foundation is not part and parcel of the district itself. Even though it has the district name in it, it is in name as referencing to the members of the foundation. The foundation itself is different than most foundations that we're all familiar with. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about elections and members of the board. But I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us. I also want to give a shout out or an acknowledgement to the board members who have been so instrumental in developing these revised bylaws. So thank you to everybody. Naomi?
Thank you. So the foundation was started in December 1998, and it's to provide the clubs in the district. So the clubs in the district that are participating are called the members of the foundation, and it is a separate entity, as Wynn said. So we're going to be going through the proposed bylaw amendments, and we're going to break it up into these 4 sections. So it's the board makeup, and so Wynn will handle that, is the composition, the election and representation, the new standing committees. And so these slides that follow are just the main amendment changes that we're going to review. There are a lot of small things in the typos or the capitalization, so we won't be covering that. We're just covering the main changes on the bylaws. Okay, then for finances, Mark will cover the budget, the fees, the acceptance, refund policy. Then membership administration will be Marianne. So each person will go over the changes on the bylaws, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the first part for board, Wynn, the composition.
Great, thank you, Naomi. So let's talk a little bit about foundations in general before we get started. Our clubs, or especially nonprofit organizations, I guess, if you will, our clubs are 501c4 organizational structures and are not qualified to accept tax-deductible donations directly. A 501c3 develops into two distinctive categories that I know or are familiar with. One is our common foundation that we're familiar with. Many clubs have them, many organizations that we're familiar with, where you're invited to be a member of the board. The board hosts elections within themselves for who's going to be president, vice president, and board members. A member-based 501c3 is a little bit different. We're required, number one, to have an annual meeting of the members. We're moving towards having direct representation from the membership. So the goal and the aspirations of the board is not to build the foundation for themselves, but to really manage the foundation for the benefit of the members. So the composition of the current board has many of these same aspects, but I think currently is 11 members. And we're looking to move it towards a direct representation with a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and directors that are elected directly by the membership. The president of the board previously was by the bylaws to be the immediate past district governor. We want to really, I think, represent the members of the foundation, and so have removed that requirement and moved it to a president who is elected by the membership. Next. We also have a vice president. The vice president actually holds, and you'll see later on when Marianne Berry talks about some of the standing committees, the vice president has a lot of duties and responsibilities in terms of developing the foundation with training, with reviews and audits, and great responsibility within the board as far as the nominating committee and that kind of stuff. The secretary, like many secretaries, is invaluable. Basically that one person that keeps the board on track and focused, also manages all of the paperwork. One of the things that we will talk about a little bit is making sure that we have conflicts of interest paperwork filed that keeps everybody focused, I guess would be the best word for that. Treasurer, Mark has done an admirable job of treasurer for the last 3 years, has custody of all of the funds and that kind of stuff. But in addition to that, really has to make evaluations as to whether or not the application or the of funds is within the guidelines of our 501c3 and stuff. Next. Standard board terms have moved away from currently the board sits 3 years except for the president, which is a 1-year term. We're asking to move to 1-year renewable terms with a maximum of 3 consecutive terms in any one position on the board. That's not to say that you couldn't move from being president to being a director. And then back again. As we've all experienced, sometimes it's challenging to find people who are passionate about a particular board. So we're moving in that direction. Next slide, please. The election, one of the challenges that we face with we'll be asking to approve the revised bylaws June 27th, is we have a nominating committee, and the nominating committee under the proposed bylaws would recommend, but are not required to have nominees for each position. We could also open up nominees to selection from the floor. The election is typically held at our annual meeting. Our annual meeting will be on June 7th, so we'll
Okay,
We
is
lost Win?
yeah, I guess Win is frozen. So when we have the election, we'll have a proposed slate, and we can take nominations from the floor. So I believe we are still in the window where we're accepting, Mark Miriam, is that true? We're still accepting some suggestions for the slate. So that will take place. Okay, so if you do have suggestions for the slate, then just let Mark Miriam know. So the slate will be presented and at a later date, and we'll let you know after that. So the first step is right now review. So this is just a review of the proposed bylaws. We're going to be voting on the amended revised bylaws on the 27th. After we approve the bylaws, we have the election in July. Okay, so I think we lost Win. So were there any questions on the board amendments that Win went over?
Naomi,
Yes.
I saw the word county in there, so I'm assuming that this refers to the county designation as the county, city and county of Hawaii and all that. So the county of Hawaii would have one member on the
Correct.
foundation?
Correct. So we want representation from all of the areas, and we didn't want to say island because that means Lanai and Molokai would have one. So it's by the county. So Maui County covers Lanai and Molokai. So that was the reason for putting in that word county. But it is representation from all of the areas in the state. Good.
Then my confusion is that I looked at the board membership right now, and there's a lot more than the number of counties in the state of Hawaii.
Correct. And that is what one of the changes to the bylaws is, that we're changing the composition of the board so that we do have number one, representation from all of the areas, but number two was a smaller board, but it's also limited to the members. So a Rotarian from a member club can be on the board, but if you're not from a member club, you're not able to be on the board. So that is another change.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Naomi,
Other question? Yes.
Naomi, did you see questions on the
just
chat?
to clarify, Alan, the new bylaws say that there is an at-large director. So if Hilo, the Big Island, has a nominee for both sides, it is possible for both the Hilo side and the Kona side to be represented on the foundation, because there is a fifth board member, which is an at-large board member.
Okay.
Yeah,
So question.
I understand.
Thank you. So questions in the chat. Thank you. So do the members of the board have to be Rotarians? Yes, they need to be a Rotarian from a club that is a member of the foundation. And then who makes up the floor for nominations? It would be people at that meeting, and the person needs to be present. Okay, so are the board members paid? Board members are not paid. No compensation for board members. And a member means a club who is a member of the foundation. That is considered, the club is the member, not the Rotarian. And we do have the question about the member clubs. We have a definition part at the end of the bylaws that defines members to only Rotary District 5000 clubs. So you have to be a club in good standing in District 5000 to be a member of the foundation. So thank you, Marjorie, it is there. The people, who are the people at the meeting? And so it's anyone can attend the meeting, but the voting members would be the president of the member club, the member that would be able to vote. Yes, any Rotarian can attend, but the voting is restricted. Okay.
Well, that made my job easy. I don't know where I disappeared to, but thank you.
No problem. Other questions for the board presentation, the slides that went over? Otherwise, we can move to finance and then membership and admin after that.
Naomi,
Any other, yes, David?
I got a little confused. Did you say the president is the representative to the foundation, or is it somebody who's elected in the club?
The member is the member, the club who's a member of the foundation is actually able to go to the meeting, and they're represented by the president. So right now, the people who vote on the revisions would be the current president of the club, of the member clubs.
I
Okay.
see.
Okay.
There-
So only that voting person is that the president, unless they designate someone else to sit in there on their behalf.
Got
That
it.
designation needs to be done in writing. So any proxies need to be done in writing.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. So we're going to move on to Mark on finances.
Thank you. So as serving treasurer, we have refined a few things in the proposed bylaws. And one is to be clearer on our donation acceptance policy, which was not in writing before. And so we need to make sure that we follow the rules of the IRS as a 501c3 organization, and that all donations come in for the purpose of our foundation, which is general enough to be club service projects, global projects, community service activities, scholarship programs, and the like. So it's general enough, but we want to make sure that we all donations are limited to the purpose of the foundation itself. And that's what that whole paragraph is all about. The monies that come into the foundation are the property of the foundation, and it's held in trust for the member clubs. And so any monies that come into the foundation, each of our Rotary member clubs have a restricted account within the general account, and that money is restricted for the use of that specific Rotary member club. Okay. We have not had a refund policy in the past. It's become an issue a couple different times. So we want to be clear that what the monies, how they're donated and how money could be refunded. We're going to be asking all of our member clubs to include this 2 sentences on part of all their solicitations, whether it's a solicitation letter to sponsorships or at the bottom of a fundraising ticket. The donations are contributions to the foundation, a 501c3, on behalf of our member Rotary clubs. Refunds can be made so long as written notice is given in 15 days to the solicitor of the donation. But the monies are the foundation monies held in trust for our individual member clubs. Okay. So I mentioned already that the funds are held for the benefit of each of our member clubs. If a club decides to leave our District 5000 Foundation, the monies would be returned to that individual Rotary club, as long as the foundation knows that those monies will be used for the purposes that they were donated. Again, that would be scholarships, community service, international projects, and the like. If a club disbands, is no longer a member of Rotary, then those funds would go to the Rotary Foundation endowment account. We don't see
Question?
that happening because, yep.
Do do you keep some kind of a measure that's passed through the foundation, a bottom line, so to speak, passed on from year to year at the end of the fiscal year? Do you keep a reserve, in other words? My first question.
That's a good question. We have a single checking account. It's currently with First Hawaiian Bank. That's where all 100% of the funds are kept. So it's a cash account, so monies are available rapidly. It's an ongoing foundation, so it's not based on a Rotary calendar year. So money would carry over from one year to the next year. And any club at any time can find out exactly. I can print out a general ledger immediately as to how funds have come in and out of your specific member club account.
Can a specific member club overspend their allotment?
No.
No, there's only, if you have $1,000 in the foundation, then you have $1,000 to spend.
Yes, there is no reserve. All of the money is in a sub account for each club, so there is no reserve. So if we can move to the operating budget, and there's just one or two more slides, and then we have some other questions about the fundraisers and donations. So Mark?
Got it. The treasurer, we already reviewed in an earlier slide what the job description is, but one of the things that's been added is that we'll make sure that there's an annual budget, an annual foundation operating budget. Our current expenses for the foundation, we have it used to be an annual audit. Now we're doing a financial compilation. We have to prepare an IRS Form 990 on an annual basis. And then there's incidental stamps and envelopes kind of expenses. But other than that, there's really no operating expenses associated with the foundation. We're all volunteers. We're just doing it. The IRS Form 990 is filed annually after the completion of the Rotary year. So we'll finish this year, June 30th, and start preparing our IRS Form 990, which will be presented in the early fall. And that happens every year. The foundation finances in the past, as part of the District 5000 operating budget, the district has paid for the financial compilation. It is not in this year's budget, so the foundation is a separate entity. We're responsible for paying for that IRS Form 990 preparation and the financial compilation or review. And so the board, as part of the new bylaws, that there may be a membership fee to cover the cost of the financial preparations. That is a definite difference in addition to these new bylaws. Okay. Before I answer questions, I just want to mention a couple things, and it's already showing up in the chat. Checks or donations are written out to Rotary District 5000 Foundation. That is the entity that receives the donations. Clubs, sometimes many of our clubs with their fundraisers, they process the fundraiser through their club, and then the proceeds that are charitable, that club will write a check to the foundation and put money in their account that way. That becomes a restricted account. It's just for ease of use, and I've been treasurer for a few years now. It's my home mailing address that the checks come to, and that would probably change if there's a new treasurer. As far as disbursements go, we have a simple requisition form that requires 2 signatures from the club president, and generally it's the community service director or international service director. But it's just a simple, please send me $500 for a scholarship and a mailing address and signatures of approval that we get from the clubs to be able to disperse any funds. If it's for a district grant, it's pretty easy. It's a district grant, whatever, and it's $750, and the check would go to the Rotary Club for a district grant that you can then use and use it for your community service projects. So that's kind of the how we accept checks and how we disperse them. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
One question, is there like a written process or procedure on how the member clubs would get the funds that they, yeah, I'm wondering whether the foundation, the district foundation, has responsibility of approving or disapproving a request for funding, or does it, if the club requests it, do you automatically just give them the money?
Yes, the club receives the funds so long as within the purpose of the foundation. And so that would be community service. It cannot be for club operations. It cannot be to support a member and their dues. It has to be within the charitable purpose of the foundation. And so it has not been an issue because the monies are used for community service and scholarships and global projects.
Okay, so that's left to the club member to make sure that they follow that rule, right?
Mhm.
Yes, and that's
Yes.
written
So every member,
more. So that's written clearly in the new revised bylaws. It's more specific than it was in the past.
Who in the Zoom session is moderating all the questions in the chat?
I am,
Are you going to be asking them?
yes. So I think the win, were you chiming in on that? No? Okay,
no,
so,
I just wanted to be clear that any member club agrees to abide by the rules of the bylaws, agrees to the bylaws, and that's where everybody is responsible to make sure that they are good with what they're doing. So Mark covered it.
okay, and I
I
wanted
think
to
Jeff
say,
said it.
we do have an education committee, and we are going to be having an education session with the president-elects in a few more weeks. And so that's where we would cover a lot of these questions about the donations and the purposes and how to use that money. But we always need to remember that when someone donates money for a fundraiser or any thing that you do, that if there is a certain purpose that they were giving the money for, that the club is responsible to make sure that the money is used for that purpose if it was solicited that way. So one of the questions was if how those donations are coming in by check. And so normally you would be collecting it at the club level and then sending the checks, if it's payable to the foundation, to Mark, and Mark would deposit that. So if it's a charge card, we haven't been taking charge card payments unless it's for a district event like the Lava Relief Fund was a charge card payment by PayPal. But normally the club would be collecting the payments and then submitting it either by check payable to the foundation or a lump sum. Mark, some of the other questions, if we can go through those quickly.
Yeah, let me respond to Jeff's questions about receipts and donor thank yous. We've left that as a club responsibility. We should have, don't have now, but a general kind of a letter that would be appropriate to send as a thank you. And that's always been a club responsibility for the mahalos and receipts and thank yous. I think we can, as part of our education process, we'll come up with a generic letter that has common wording that could be used. He asked also about a database of donors. No, there's no database of donors or corporate sponsors. Since the money comes through the member clubs, it's always been the responsibility of the club to know who their donors are.
I didn't get an answer to, my question. I understand there's the Form 990 and there is a review. Have you priced the cost of a review yet?
The last 2 years, the CPA has charged us a little over $2,000 to do a financial compilation and to prepare the IRS Form 990.
And then what about ongoing, like is there monthly statements that are shared with the club? Your account balances, your distributions have been, your contributions were?
Yep, anytime a member club asks for that through either their foundation representative or a president, then I can generate, as treasurer, I've been able to generate that quickly.
Is it done,
And
is it on demand or is it a regular process?
It's on demand. Some clubs are bigger users and have more questions than others. And as far as your question about funds distributed directly to the recipient, yes, we have. If it's a community service project to another nonprofit agency, the check can be written directly to the agency. If it's a scholarship, generally it's written to the name of the student and the school that they're will be going to. So in that way, the funds can be distributed directly to the recipient, yes.
Can I just jump in as far as writing the donor thank yous? One thing the clubs have to remember, you know, Mark said that the clubs would be responsible for doing the thank you letters, but the clubs are not the 501c3. So if your thank you letter mentions thank you for your donation of $100, the template is the foundation's template. So someone from the foundation needs to sign that letter. A club cannot sign that letter because the club is a 501c4. So usually what happens is if you have donors who say give less than $250 and you have a lot of those and they want a receipt, then the club would be responsible for generating those letters, but the foundation, either the treasurer or the president or the secretary from the foundation needs to sign those letters.
So for example, if we have a silent auction and we have 100 people donating, we automatically send them a thank you for the value. We're going to generate 100 letters and you're going to sign 100 letters for us?
Well, if you have, if that's, yeah. I mean, you know, the clubs, correct me if I'm wrong, Wynn, but the clubs cannot sign those letters. Or Mark, you know?
So for the district or the foundation has a legal responsibility to represent the, so there's two things need to happen. Is one is you need to be very careful and not to say what is tax deductible and what is not, because that's between them and their tax preparer. The foundation itself is happy to, well, we're not happy to, but is willing to sign the necessary paperwork to recognize donors, and we can do that jointly with the member.
Thanks, Wayne. So I wonder if we could, I want to ask Ron Margolis, is the question on the amendment changes or is it on donations? Ron, you have your hand up?
It's not on the amendment changes.
Okay. Okay, I wonder if we can go through the amendment changes first and then we can cover all of these other questions at the end. Is that okay?
Yeah, we can talk afterwards.
Okay, so were there any questions regarding the finance amendment changes? No? Okay, so we're going to go on to standing committees with Marianne.
Okay, the new bylaws call for 3 standing committees: the nominating committee, which will develop a slate of proposed foundation officers and directors for the following year. The audit committee, the vice president will organize and chair the audit committee, and the audit committee will be comprised of 3 Rotarians from the member clubs with the necessary experience to evaluate member compliance with accepted fundraising practices and use of funds. You know, it's just, we're not going to be big brother, but we have to ensure, the foundation has to ensure that the member clubs are complying with accepted fundraising practices. And if you come in for, say, a request for, someone took a trip to the Philippines to scope out some kind of a possible club project, or even a possible global grant. The club and the foundation cannot pay for that trip. That is not under the purposes of why the foundation was established. So, if you send in a request for reimbursement for that travel, the foundation will deny it. So that's an extreme case, but it's just that the foundation just needs to be sure that the clubs are using the money properly. Like if you have a club project, say cleaning the beach, and you, after you do the project, you send a request for reimbursement to the club for the supplies, the trash bags, gloves, or whatever that you used. And if you fed the club members who participated in the project, that's allowable. But if you're going to have a party later on for the club after you did the service project, that's different from feeding the people who actually worked on the project. So can did I explain that clearly, the differences?
Not really.
And then the third is the education committee. As Naomi indicated, even our current member clubs don't fully understand what the foundation stands for and how they can use it. We will be developing sort of like a operations manual. It won't be a huge manual, just maybe a couple of pages, but it'll just give you instances of how you can use, how to provide the funds to the foundation, and how you can ask for the foundation's, for the funds after you've put them into the foundation. And for non-member clubs, currently there are 42 out of the 53 clubs in the district who are members of the foundation. And for those others, if they are at all interested in joining the foundation, we'd be glad to go out and, give them okay, this is what the foundation can do for you, how you can use it. And the question, will the foundation deny travel expenses for PEs to pets? Yes, that's a club expense. That's not something that the foundation will pay for. Yeah. Thank you, John and Jeff. Yes. Pets money comes from the club budget, not foundation. Any other questions?
Are we locked up? No. No more questions?
All right, can you go back to the conflict of interest again, please?
Okay.
A member has a financial or other personal interest, including a conflict of fiduciary interest. due to such person's status as an officer or director of another organization in a transaction, in a transaction, contract, or other matters related to the funds held or dispersed by the foundation.
Yeah, so Margie, I think that just, I think we just need to make sure that everybody's above board. If you're on the board of another nonprofit or another organization and we're going to disperse funds to that organization, need to be above board that we know that that is occurring. Doesn't mean that it's prohibited, but we just want to make sure that we're highly visible to everybody with those kind of things, so there's no background accusations, favoritism, things that have happened previously. So we're trying to avoid that just with a conflict of interest statement.
So it's mostly for the purposes of full disclosure.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
How about, now I'm curious about like reimbursement. I'll just ask my question. If you have a club member who makes donations to the foundation to reimburse for items that are used by the club, for example, traffic signs for trash pickup, old faded signs needed replacing, and a member said, I'll donate those signs to the club. So they write a monetary donation to the foundation for the contribution and then ask the foundation to pay the bill for the signs. Is that something that's possible with this structure?
You want me to step in, Naomi, or?
Go ahead.
Mark? So I can't say for sure what would be admissible or what would not. My suggestion to you is we into the foundation and in regards to the tax deductibility of that. That's between the person in their tax preparer. It's not something that we would get involved in as far as tax deductibility or not. And that's where things get kind of gray, is it tax deductible or not? That's between them and whether they want to take a write-off on it or not with their account.
Well, if they've made a contribution to the foundation.
But unless I'm wrong, Mark, it can be a contribution to the foundation. How it's used and that kind of stuff, or whether it has to be within the rules of what the foundation is used for. But what gets most people bogged down is, can I deduct that off of my taxes? I'm in a position where I would never tell anybody, yes, you can deduct this, or no, you can't deduct that. Yeah. I would say tell that person, that's between you and your accountant. We will give you a receipt.
Yeah, thanks,
for
Wynn.
Your contribution.
Thanks, Wynn. That wasn't my question, though. I wasn't questioning the tax. I asked if the mechanics were there to do that.
Okay, Margie, if maybe I can help you. All right, say your club wants to do this project to replace those stop signs, and someone donates money to buy new stop signs, but he makes a donation to the foundation, and then the club goes out and buys the new stop signs, then yes, that reimbursement can be made because it was for that specific project.
Mm-hmm. So, but you have the mechanics. This process has the mechanics for that?
Yeah, it's what you do is you, there's a one-page form, request for disbursement, and then you put the Rotary Club name, the name of the project. If you have the receipts for the stop signs, you include that. You explain what you did. You replaced old faded stop signs, and you bought 100 new stop signs, and then you have your club president and the individual involved in that project sign that form. Then you send it to the treasurer. The treasurer looks at it. Yes, it's payable, and then they'll send the check. That's the kind of thing that's going to be in the operations manual.
Mm-hmm.
And the education piece. So, Marianne, are we done with the conflict of interest section? Did you want to move on to membership in good standing? Marianne?
Sure.
Okay, so, but we covered this conflict of interest, right? We're good? Okay, membership in good standing?
Okay, as I indicated, the current membership in the foundation is 42 clubs out of the 53. And what all is involved is a resolution indicating that the board has decided that the club would like to be a member of the foundation and signed by the club president. That's, I think we have a template, Mark. If not, you know, we can send one out to the club for them to use.
No, we do, because we have a couple clubs that are joining right now. And so our brand new club, the Eco Club of Kaka'ako, just became a member. And so we have a template, yes.
So the membership in good standing was added in. So the procedure to become a member, I think, is still the same, but we're adding a membership in good standing, which means that the club that is asking for a new membership into the foundation needs to be in good standing with the district and with Rotary International. So that means that, you know, the dues have been paid and you're an active club. Okay, so the amendment change in this section is that we added that the club needs to be in good standing. Okay, so I think that one is self-explanatory, and then there's another one about electronic meetings. So Marianne, you want to talk about electronic meetings?
Yeah, and it's just serendipity that we decided to add an article on electronic meetings, since we're having a lot of Zoom meetings now. But sometimes for not only the board meetings, but also for membership meetings, aside from the annual meeting, or even including the annual meeting, it may be held electronically by Zoom or whatever. And as long as all of the participants can hear one another. And but the thing is, if there is a vote to be taken, it can be taken at the electronic meeting, but we cannot have an email vote. We can't send out to all of the member clubs a proposal that needs a vote and then ask for their vote via email, because the email doesn't constitute a meeting. And we're still researching this, but we were told that in Hawaii, if you do have an email vote, it has to be unanimous. So that's.
I can confirm that, Marianne, that is true.
Yeah. So.
Okay, and the reason for that is that when you have a meeting like that, there's no discussion. And so that's why it needs to be 100%. So
Correct.
That is only when we're talking about an electronic meeting, so, or a voting. But this whole part is about adding, because nowadays we have Zooms and the whole, we're doing more electronic meetings and voting and communication, but just that a meeting is not an email. A meeting would be, an electronic meeting would be like Zoom or someplace where you can have discussion. Okay, so the next slide is on indemnification. And sorry, there's a typo right here because I just had to move this yesterday. So Marianne, did you want to cover this indemnification, or did you want to have Wynn cover it?
Wynn, can you cover it?
Absolutely. So this has been fairly standard for a number of years. The foundation is run by all volunteers with various degrees of knowledge and understanding. So written into the bylaws is an indemnification clause that basically make sure that the members as well as the board are not sued by outside agencies. And if we are, that the foundation covers those kinds of things. It is pretty standard, but we have never had a real issue with this to begin with. We've
Any
always
question?
been really good with the Form 992, so kudos
Where
to
is
Mark.
this language inserted?
What's that?
Where is this language inserted?
Section 3.18 and Article 12.
But of what? Of what?
Of
Bylaw?
the-
The
Okay, so
bylaws of the foundation.
The proposed amendments in the bylaws were sent to the member clubs, and this will be discussed at the 27th meeting, and that's where it's going to be voted on. So if you would like a copy, then Marianne, who did we send it to? Oh, so sorry, you're
We sent it-
Annalee, so they did not get a copy, right?
Right, yeah, okay. What I can do is I can send, I'll send John a copy of the current bylaws, the proposed bylaws,
The executive summary.
and the executive summary. I can send you those three. Is that okay?
I did get those the other day by email, I think, but I didn't get the changes in the bylaws.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll just send you all those three documents just to be sure that you get the current versions, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so again, we will have another meeting to go over review the bylaw changes again, but there's going to be a vote of the current member clubs, and the voting person would be the president of the club at this time. Once the bylaws are accepted and we move on to the new rules, then we'll have the slate of officers voted on at that time. So remember that we changed on the bylaws the positions. So the president, for instance, is no longer the immediate past district governor. It's a person that's elected. Okay, so now we've finished all of the proposed bylaw changes, and then we can go into some of the specific questions that are in the chat. Okay, so so we were talking about votes on the board vote and the membership vote. So the some of the items for the board level are voted by the board, and some require the members to vote. So for instance, any amendment to the bylaws needs to be voted by the members. So the member is the club, right? So the board votes would be on like cosmetic proposals to the bylaws, but it doesn't change until the membership votes on it. The slate is the membership. Any major decision is by the members voting. Usually it's done at the annual meeting, but the meeting can be for the members to vote, can be at any time if it's called for a special meeting. Okay. Mark, I think you covered who the checks are payable to, but did you want to cover again the process on who the check is payable to and how you keep track of the donations and what kind of reports they get?
Sure. Everything is on QuickBooks, and so each club has a restricted account within our First Hawaiian Bank checking account. The disbursements, I can produce a general ledger at any time for any club to give you an up-to-date report of both checks that have been received and checks that have been written.
Marianne?
Mark Wolfendale had a question about if the club receives multiple donations, do we consolidate all the donations and submit one check to the district foundation while keeping records on the club level? What we used to do for our fundraiser was we had one person receive the checks for the tickets, and the checks were made out to the foundation. but they would receive the checks for the tickets that people bought, and maybe like, depending on how many they got each week, either once a week or once every other week, then consolidate all of those checks, make a copy for the club records, and then send the checks to the district foundation treasurer.
It works better that way because the checks are written directly to the District 5000 Foundation. So you do not want to process it through your club account because that takes away the advantage of the charitable foundation. So when a club has multiple checks, they just kind of gather their 10 or 15, whatever number of checks, and send them all at one time. So then it truly gets deposited directly into the charitable foundation.
What we're curious about is, let's take our last fundraiser. So we have 100 admissions that come in through Square. We do everything electronically. And then we have a vacation for donation. And those are individual donations from all over the country. They come in individually electronically. We can't take them into our club account, right? Because then it's taxable. So how do we get them to you?
That's a good question. We'd have to work on that one. I'm familiar with Square. We would have to route it directly through the district foundation or the club, except we'd have to work it directly through the district foundation somehow.
Well, you can give them instructions to make the check payable to the district foundation, but many times the checks are payable to the club and it's a pass-through. So for instance, when someone makes a donation to the Rotary Foundation and you take it at your club level, it's going through your club and it's a pass-through. The club makes a check payable to the foundation, the Rotary Foundation or the district foundation. So it kind of depends on your situation, where the money is coming from. I see that from Marjorie, you take 15 to 50 checks a month. I mean, if it is going to be handled that way, then it's possible. If you're collecting it at your PO box and they're all payable to the district foundation, you can consolidate them and send the checks all at once to the district foundation. So I think the specifics of your mechanics need to be worked out with the board, the treasurer, to see how we can assist on that.
I think Ron's question was, we collect electronically.
Right, so it's going into your club account, right?
No, it's going into our foundation bank account.
Okay, but if you are not going to use your foundation and the money is going to the district foundation, then so because if you put it into your foundation, your club foundation, then it's already in your club foundation. So
I
it should stay
understand
there.
if we were to leave our foundation and work with this foundation, we're trying to understand the mechanics of how that deposit would be made.
I think we're going to need to work that out because we're not set up to take regular charge card payments on the district foundation level. So it might be that you accept it on your club level and you give us one check to the district foundation and you're a pass-through. So let us, there is going to be an education session where we can kind of have a FAQ on all of these questions and see how the mechanics can. But for your situation, because you have a unique process and mechanics, maybe you can have a one-on-one with the board or with Mark. Is that okay?
Could I please ask I have a question about this pass-through. Yeah,
So
where was that determined to be appropriate to have a check made to a club and then given to a foundation, moved to a foundation?
okay, so for instance, you collect money for your meals and you give it to the restaurant, right? It's a pass-through. You're not collecting GET on it. It's a pass-through. Okay, but again, I'm not an attorney. I think we should wait for these questions to go to the education session where we do have experts on that. But let me give you an example where your club takes in donations for Polio Plus or the Rotary Foundation. You take it at the club level, right? and then you make a club check payable to the Rotary Foundation. That's a pass-through.
But Naomi, see, the thing is, with those two types of donations, the Rotary Foundation and the and Polio Plus, when the club sends the money in, they fill out a multiple donor form. So the amount is attributed to the member who made the donation. Right. And Rotary then sends a thank you letter. But the problem is, if with electronic donations, it's very difficult. If someone wants a receipt and they make an electronic donation, that is very difficult to track, because many times when you make it electronically, like Mark just recently had, it was just an electronic funds transfer, a donation from a club in Japan to one of the clubs here, and they made it directly to the foundation account. When the bank puts that money into the foundation account, there is no information about who sent it. You know, so Mark had to do a real difficult research, and fortunately, the club mentioned that they would be having this electronic transfer, so he could go to one club, or I think he asked 2 clubs, you know, did your sister club recently send in a donation? Electronic donations are very difficult to give a receipt for.
Okay, so in that case, I think it's a little different when you take it on a charge card. So when, for instance, when we took the lava relief on PayPal, it did identify the person. But okay, again, we're going into the mechanics. If we can save that for the education session where we can answer these questions and get an expert on the line. And I think we have 2 hands. One is Ron McGorlis, and then the other is Marge Gifford. So Ron, your question?
I wound up asking it because my hand was hurting from being up too long.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, Margie.
Muted.
I'm
Marjorie,
Bill.
muted. Your phone's muted.
Okay, wait.
Oh,
Okay, I'm unmuted. It really isn't all that hard. We have a separate account in our foundation right now that is just for gathering all the information from the fundraiser, and the report comes from them, and it tells us who deposited money, how much was for donation, and how much was for tickets, and how much was for our Pot of Gold fund, and then we just handle it mechanically. And so we could send a single donation to the District 5000 instead of individual donations all the way up and down the board. It would work very well.
okay, good, thank you. Some of the other questions in the chat, who makes the decision on the whether the club or the board decides to go with the district foundation? The resolution is signed by the club. So the club is the member. So if your foundation is going to terminate, that's separate. The club is the member for the foundation, and the club would do the resolution, and it's the club's board that makes that decision. Okay. Then this Zoom meeting is recorded, so we'll have that link up soon on the district website. We'll put it on the district website. And then the physical meetings portion, that is what we understand as one of the rules for electronic meetings, that when you have a vote, it needs to be 100%. So you can check with your attorney that drew up your documents that there could be something in your documents that says it does not need to be 100%, but just remember the whole reason why that is because there's no discussion. So if you had discussion at a meeting and then you're taking the vote afterwards, that may qualify by not being unanimous. Okay, and then electronic processing for payments. We have for many years not offered that unless it's a special situation. So we're not taking PayPal or credit card payments onto the district 5,000 for the foundation purposes. Okay, and the reason why is we don't really have a website for the district foundation, and the mechanics on a electronic payment would be a lot of work, and we really don't, we have all volunteers. Okay, then there's a question about activities covered by the foundation, and is there a tax deductible donation to facilitate the activities? And again, we need to look at what the purposes are for the foundation donations. So it needs to be within the definition of purposes that we can accept these donations for. So as Marianne said, it's not for club operations. It's usually for scholarships, humanitarian things, scholarships. And we will cover that at the education session. Okay. So the club activities, I think you need to work with your accountant on that one. Sometimes if it's a corporation, they're able to make a donation to the club for club operations activities and deduct it as an expense on the business side. So there are some ways that you can do it, but you should ask your tax accountant. Okay, and then yes, Mark, a lot of people are making donations electronically. That's something that the new board can look into, but as it is right now, we're not accepting routine electronic payments through Square, PayPal, or other methods. Okay, were there any other questions? Did I miss anybody?
Naomi, Bill
Bill Butler.
treasurer of the foundation, of the Honolulu Bay Foundation, or the new one. What I'm trying to figure out is we have a very active foundation doing a large number of transactions each month. To what degree does anybody else keep an operating account for their foundation within their direct control and then send you the rest of the money that is not going to be in that, and then you do the tax returns at the end of the year? In other words, we would write checks, we would take in the projects such as Marjorie just talked about, but you would have, maybe we would keep some figure for operating and you would hold the rest of the funds.
So Bill, I think I kind of understand what you're trying to do. All of the funds, if you're going to use it for projects and that kind of stuff, first need to go to the foundation. You can't hold, I don't believe you can hold anything back and just say we're going to keep it. It all needs to go to the foundation. If you figured out that you had 6 months worth of expenses or 3 months worth of expenses, you could probably ask Mark for a single check. You put that into your checking account and disperse it from there to pay for whatever the bills. If I'm correct, Mark can really check it out. I think everything would need to come through the foundation to begin with. You can't just hold back parts of it here and there. Mark?
Okay, thank you.
Naomi, can I inject a thought here for Bill?
Thanks,
Ray?
Bill, I understand what you're asking if you want to maintain your present foundation account for Honolulu Bay. By doing that, you're going to have to file your 990 for that also. once you keep that account, so it's a matter of choice for you, but it puts you in a different light. You're going to have your money is going to two different places. So whatever you use or you maintain an account for your Hanalei Bay, the present account that you have, you still have to, you're going to be filing your 990 for that. So that's my thought.
Well, Ray, my understanding was that they were doing away with their foundation and utilizing the District 5000 Foundation, but maybe keeping a checking account open like we do for grants. Is that correct?
The assumption on my question is exactly as you just described it, Win.
Okay.
Okay, but one thing you have to be sure though, that any disbursements from the District 5000 Foundation have to fall under certain activities, which is what David Dinner asked. Restate what activities are covered by the foundation. Examples are district grants, global grants, scholarships, and your service projects, okay? And when I say service projects, I think I mentioned, like, if you have a beach cleanup, and then you have your Interact Club helping you out, and you have 40 people doing a beach cleanup. The supplies for that beach cleanup, the bags, trash bags, gloves, or whatever. And then, like I said, if you want to feed the people who participate in that service project, okay, those things can be paid for by the foundation. But if you decide later on after the beach cleanup project, that night you're going to have a party for your club members, the foundation won't pay for that party. They'll pay for the food and drink specifically related to that service project that you had earlier, but they're not going to pay for another dinner or party for your club members later on that night.
We're learning on many different levels, and I understand that. Marjorie Gifford just wrote, we have a non-tax deductible account, handle income from fundraisers, and the account could also pay the expenses. Then the net would be transferred to the D5000 Foundation. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking at. How do we run a project when we're putting out money to run it and not overwhelm you with the administrative necessities?
Bill, you could collect receipts for 2 months or a month or 6 months or whatever you worked out with the treasurer. I'm sure you and the treasurer guys can work that out as to, you know, a plan, not only for disbursements, but for deposits and that kind of stuff. Seems eminently workable.
Well, it's not just the money coming in, it's the money going out too.
Yep.
Bill, yeah, you can, and as Marjorie says, you have a non-tax deductible account to handle income from fundraisers, and this account could also pay the expenses. Our club has a separate fundraising account, and in that account, we put, some people, you know, still, they don't care about making a donation and getting a receipt for the donation. So if they buy tickets to our fundraiser, if they buy 5 tickets at $100 a piece, and they write a check to $500, they write it to the club, and we say, don't you want to write it to the foundation and you can get a receipt for your donation? They say, no, that's okay. And they said, put it, you know, in, they still say, write it to the club. So we put that check in that separate fundraising account. And what we also do too, now as far as the proceeds from the silent auction, okay? The checks for payments for silent auction items are made to the club. Those checks are put into that separate fundraising account. And all of that money is used to pay for the expenses for the event. I know it's you know, humbug to have so many different accounts, but we worked that way for years and we've had no problem. We have the separate fundraising account to pay the expenses.
That was exactly what I was looking for, to see if we could still do that.
It really depends though, Bill.
Well, you did. Thank
Okay,
But make
Bill,
just make it an account though. It shouldn't be a foundation, because if you have, as long as you have a foundation, you're going to have to file that 990.
That's right.
Naomi, I
yes,
still had a question that
yes,
didn't
David.
get answered. And that is there a cost to belong to the foundation for each club, or is it just a membership of a group of people?
So
Mark?
previously, the District 5000 as an organization has paid for filing our taxes and 990 and that kind of stuff. It's not something that we believe is fair to the district and equitable to everybody. So as of right now, we have two possible pathways forward. One would be to find an accountant who would be willing to donate as part of their goodwill to the community, processing the audit or filings for the District 5000 Foundation, or the other possible path forward would be to charge a fee by some manner to be determined by the future count. That's why we have established or will be establishing an operating account for the District 5000 Foundation. We didn't previously have that.
So
Mark,
David, yes, there is a fee. There is a fee, and it's not determined right now because it depends on what the expenses are for the foundation. So we're looking at somewhere between maybe $25 or $50 for a small club, and maybe up to $100 for a large club. So there will be a fee to cover the expenses of the foundation, but that amount has not been determined as yet. Okay, so when we were talking about the net, I think when we do the education session, we can go deeper into these questions that we have about what we can accept as a contribution to the foundation and what is considered not acceptable. So in some cases for silent auctions, in many cases, they're not deductible for the person buying the goods because they receive benefit from that money. So those really are not deductible. So it's, if you have a fundraiser and part of your ticket is, you're saying it's that portion is deductible, then that portion is coming to the foundation, not the rest of it that paid for the fundraiser. So it really depends on where that money is coming from and what it is for. So I think we'll cover that in the education session that we'll have next month. Okay, but there is a question about the record keeping. The treasurer does keep track of the deposits, but if you're giving us a lump sum, then we're not keeping track of the donations. The foundation does need to give a receipt if the donation is $250,000 or more. And so that record needs to be kept. So some of the details on the expenses, that's the club's responsibility. So that was the answer in the chat. That is the club's responsibility for the expenses, but the treasurer will keep track of the ins and outs of that sub account. Mark, is that correct?
Totals, the totals, not the
The
details.
totals, not the details.
Yeah, so if there's 100 tickets sold at a vacation donation, it's just the total that you have track of, and we have to keep track of the individual pieces.
Right. Is that a straight donation or is it a partial? Is there, do they get any benefit or value out of that ticket?
Not unless they win.
Hey, Naomi.
Yes.
Oh, easy here. I want to use an example. You know, we have an Oktoberfest every year, and the idea was that let's say we charge them $50 or $60 or whatever, and we can say a percentage of that is tax deductible. Now, when the person writes out the check, from the discussion we had today, the person has to write it out to the Rotary District 5000 Foundation. And so how do we handle the, let's say out of $50, $20 is tax deductible and the 30 goes to the club for the expenses and the food and all that kind of stuff. What's the mechanics for that?
One way you can handle that, Alan, is on your ticket. Like what we used to do was we would say our ticket cost $100. Our expenses were $55 per person, so $45 was tax deductible. On the ticket, we would say $45 of this ticket price is tax deductible. So they can, and they can use that, you know, it would be on the part of the ticket that they retain.
No, I understand that.
As a receipt.
And that's the reason why we have the 501c3 is really for offering a person a tax deductibility of what they purchase from us. But the point is that when they write the check out, it's going to be written to the Rotary District 5000 Foundation. So the check is sent to you, $50 check is sent to you. So the mechanics of that is that you would have to take $30 of that and send it back to the club. Is that the way it works?
No, actually, that $30 is left in your club's account in the foundation, and that $30 along with everybody else's $30 is used to pay for the activities of the purposes of the foundation, which is community service projects, grants, scholarships, etc.
No, that doesn't make sense. The ticket is $50. Only $20 is tax deductible, but the check has to be written out to the Rotary District 5000, right? We're not going to ask the person to write two checks, one for $30, one for $20. We give them one ticket, and on a ticket we say $20 of this is tax deductible.
I understand what you're asking, Alan, and there are some clubs that do that. So they send all the ticket proceeds to the foundation, and then they submit a bill for all the expenses associated with the event, and all the different vendors, all the different rentals, what music, whatever it is, and a one-time check goes back to the club.
Okay, thank you.
We have done that for a variety of clubs. So all the checks come in one time to the district foundation, and then one check is a disbursement to pay for the event itself. And that goes back to the club account.
Then you'll take care of the bookkeeping of all of that, right?
Yeah, basically it's only two transactions. You send me $150 checks, and then you're going to send me one bill for $3,000 for all the expenses associated with the event. And you can just total those all up one time, and it goes back to the club itself.
Okay, so it really doesn't have to be a list of expenses. If we say that the ticket is $50 and $20 is for tax deductible to the patron, then automatically $30 goes back to the club.
So long as there's receipts to back that up, because we can't just write a check to a club without some receipts to back it up.
So let's say that that makes it complicated.
No, it's just a list of receipts. This is food, this is entertainment, this is for chair rental, boom, 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 and the total number comes out to $3,000.
No, what I'm saying is that we're selling a ticket for $50 and we're saying $20 of it is tax deductible. So the $30 is what we expect to be for the expenses of food and whatever. And sometimes it might be more than $30 and sometimes it'll be less than $30. So for the club to go through all of the trouble of expensing all the items out and everything would be, difficult. So would it be easier to just say $30 goes back to the club?
Alan, can I ask you a question?
I'll be happy to talk to you. I'll be happy to talk to you offline, but we can make it simple enough.
Yeah.
Does your event have a silent auction associated with it?
Yeah, we do. But we don't call
Okay.
it, we don't look at that as a tax deductible expense because they receive goods for whatever they purchase.
As not a tax deductible because they receive something in return?
Yeah, as long as it's, you receive something for the money you put out, you can't claim a tax
Right,
deduction for it.
okay. So when they pay for those auction items, do they pay, if they write a check, do they make the check out to the club?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what Bill and I were just talking about earlier. And I think Marjorie mentioned that you have a separate account, a club account, a fundraising account, your club fundraising account. So monies from your silent auction go into that account. That's the money that you use to pay expenses.
That we don't have a separate account. We have one account, and whatever expenses they are associated with that, that's taken care of in balancing, not balancing, but in the budget that we have allowed for the Oktoberfest. I mean, we don't, the only foundation we have right now is 501c4, and that doesn't allow you to do tax deductible contributions to the club.
Okay. I think we're getting really deep into these questions that will be answered at the education session. And hopefully we can get some things in writing so that we're kind of consistent on the answers and what we should be saying. So we will be consulting with experts before that meeting and during that meeting. We'll try and get someone at that meeting. So if you have, Hanale, if you have other specific questions, if you want to talk to Mark directly, because I think your situation is a little different than most other member clubs. But for the time being, if we're good on the amendments, if we can wrap up the meeting, any other questions on the bylaw amendments? No? I'm sure you guys want to go ahead for the beach or do some fun things right now. So thank you very much all. Wynn, did you have some closing remarks?
No, really not. I do want to say thank you to the board and thank you, Naomi, to you and Mark and Marianne for putting in such hard work into this. It's really appreciated, and I think
Naomi, I have one question.
I think that our member clubs benefit greatly by things like this. So thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ray. Aloha.
Bill?
Education session, please.
When is the education session?
When?
When,
We haven't scheduled it. We're gonna have to get the bylaw changes approved on June 27th. When we do that, we'll let everybody know who's been nominated to next year's board. Then we'll have elections after that, and we'll do a very thorough. I've talked to Mark about us joining the National Association of Nonprofits. Maybe we can bring in some expertise from outside that will help with some of these questions on proper fundraising and handling accounts and that kind of stuff. But right now we don't have a special training session scheduled on improving our fundraising abilities.
But we will have the one. Okay,
We
so
will have one, absolutely.
okay, so there was another question. Margie, you had a question?
No, I wanted to know when the education session was as well.
Okay. Okay, so that was it. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice
Thank you.
weekend.
I'd just like to say that we are really looking at the reason so many of us from Hanalei are involved is that we're trying to learn about about this group and learn whether we should give up doing our foundation the way we're doing it entirely internally. And I think we would like another day at some point when we can really talk to your lead people and get a good picture of why we should be bringing our funds to you.
You know, Bill, that's a wonderful request, and I think we can probably accommodate you. Let me talk to some of the other board members and that kind of stuff, see if we can set up a one-on-one with you folks and see how the District 5000 Foundation can meet your needs. Does that sound good?
Thank you. We would very much appreciate that.
Great.
Bill and John, I would suggest also if you have an accountant or a tax accountant that you have access to, if you would ask them too, because your situation may be very different. Because if those donations that you're taking in are maybe from companies and they're not really looking for tax deduction, they're just looking for a write-off from the business, you might want to handle those differently. So try it, see if you can get some expert assistance too with your specific situation.
I
A
agree.
second opinion. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Look,
you.
Bye. Have a good time at the beach.
John.
Hey, John. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Thank you.